Good afternoon. Welcome to this panel and welcome to our panelists. Again, I'm Evan Ramstead with the Star Tribune, and as mentioned, we're going to talk about some of the best ways to set goals and choose community partners when engaging in volunteerism and other corporate philanthropy. We will begin by asking the panelists to introduce themselves. We'll start with Sofia on the far left.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? My name is Sofia Terzic, and I'm a Community Affairs Manager for U.S. Bank. So I lead our philanthropy strategy for the state of Minnesota.
Hello, everyone. My name is Art Howard. I'm the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion at Wiley, one of the world's largest publishing company and research and education companies.
Good afternoon, Scott Peterson, Executive Vice President, CHRO at the Schwan Food Company. We make more pizzas than anybody in the world.
I'm Zaheer. I'm Dean of the Carlson School of Management here at the University of Minnesota. So welcome to the University of Minnesota. And I'm also chair of the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis. So don't blame me for interest rates.
I'm Patty Haley-Jansen. I'm the Executive Director for Jeremiah Program in Minneapolis, a national organization, and Minneapolis is our founding community 25 years ago.
And if you need a reminder, the names are up there on the wall, I just noticed. Very convenient. So we're going to begin by talking about how a little bit of historical context maybe from our panelists. Companies have engaged in civic participation and philanthropy, of course, for decades. I would ask them to begin by looking at their own careers and describing the progression they've seen in civic-mindedness and outreach and the growing role that their employers have had as sponsors of such activities. And so I think we'll start with Sri, though, first.
Thanks, Evan. It's really interesting because I think, really the tone has to start at the top with all of you leaders in the room, with folks in the C-suite, even with the heads of the companies and heads of organizations themselves. I, for one, have been suggesting to any new dean who cares to ask me for advice, engage in the community, get involved, because not only is it so hugely beneficial to you personally, it also has all these spillover effects on your organization. So for example, my husband and I, right from the beginning, we've been deeply involved in organizations like I was on the board of the United Way, I was on the board of the Guthrie Theater, on the board of the Mayo Clinic Economic Development Agency in Rochester. And all of this, and my husband is actually now co-chairing the Minnesota Orchestra's campaign, but all of this has actually embedded us so deeply in this community and has had such positive spillovers for the Carlson School itself, because you meet the same donors in a very different light when you go and see them in some other organization. So apart from the personal satisfaction you get from how much you're engaged in, whether it's the arts, whether it's social services, whether it is education, whatever interests you, I think it also kind of feeds back into the organizations that you represent. So again, the tone at the top, I think, is really important.
Sofia, how about your own career progression and what you've noticed, the evolution of your work and also the work of U.S. Bank?
Yeah, so I've been with U.S. Bank for a little over 5 years, and from when I started to now, the importance of corporate social responsibility and corporate citizen has just grown tenfold. We've expanded programs to encourage employees to volunteer. They get paid volunteer time off. Our corporate social responsibility team and department was actually elevated to be its own department, and we have a chief social responsibility officer who's part of our C-suite. So those are the little things that show employees, hey, this is super important to us as a corporation. We're elevating these departments. But then in just day-to-day happenings, right, we're seeing more and more teams, when they get together for offsites or team get-togethers, they're volunteering, right? They're not just having happy hour, but they're saying, what nonprofits are out there that we can engage in? And we have managers actually encouraging employees to add volunteerism, community engagement, and board service to their annual goal plan, and that's part of how they're graded as employees, is how did you engage with the community and how did you use your professional skills to support the community. And that's something that's really been encouraged company-wide, which is great, because it's showing our employees, we want you to take time from your day to support communities, because we think that's just as important as your role.
Art, go ahead.
Yeah, well, there's a lot said there that I agree with, Sofia. I think the progression that I've seen over my career is this civic participation and the connection to corporate responsibility and ESG, environmental, social, and governance. And what I see happening in that space is that our workforces have 3 generations within it that care more about connecting to an organization that they have values aligned with. They're interested in their well-being and interested in what the organizations are doing as being good stewards to the communities in which they live in. And these employees or colleagues, what we call them at Wiley, they're looking for that connection with their employer, and they're asking the hard questions of what are we doing and how are we doing good within our communities. So I think that's one reason why we're seeing companies focus more on it. I think leaders also have recognized the importance to mandate or to pay attention to these areas, because it drives employee engagement. When we think about it from a business perspective, I think when we think about the 3 generations that I just spoke about, these individuals have great buying power as a customer and as an investor. So I think another critical reason why organizations are really looking at how they're participating and how they're playing in the space of corporate responsibility and social under the ESG part.
Scott, you and I have longer careers than Art and Sofia, I would say. So can you describe, maybe going back even farther to when things weren't quite as sophisticated or organized as corporate philanthropy and civic engagement has become?
I appreciate your recognizing my experience, Evan. Yeah, I've been lucky. I've been at Schwan's 15 years. I've been at head of HR at Sleep Number. I think there are maybe a few Sleep Number folks here. Was at Pillsbury General Mills. And I've seen quite an evolution. Back in the day, I still remember going into my supervisor's office, and he said, I filled out your United Way card. This is what you should contribute, because we are involved in the community, and all you need to do is sign, and we're off to the races. That's not much of an overstatement as to how it was. So companies' contributions were mainly financial, almost exclusively financial. And United Way was a big part of that. And nothing wrong with that, but over time, I think companies decided they needed their philanthropic, civic efforts, community efforts to be more an extension of their culture and their mission. And then employees as well said, I'm not sure I even know where my money's going, and it's my money. So I'm really interested in having more of a voice in where it goes. So I think much more from what I'll say a broad brush approach to much more targeted giving and minutes. And that's the other, I think, evolution is it's not just about money anymore, it's about money and minutes. And that employees want to spend their time actually seeing the results of their efforts making a difference in the communities in which they live. And companies as well are much more active, as you've heard from the co-panelists, actively supporting, encouraging, and even expecting it. So I think it's been a healthy progression, a good progression, and I think our community, and by the way, I think we're so blessed in Minnesota because the companies that are here have always been philanthropic and civic, and I think they've altered their approach based on what the communities actually need.
Thanks. And Patty, as a leader in a organization that is the recipient of some help from corporations, tell us what you've seen in the progression of this. Yeah.
Well, and I just want to acknowledge Sofia and US Bank. US Bank has been a really wonderful corporate partner in a really integrated, holistic way for a really long time, from philanthropy to board leadership to engagement with employees, and it makes a huge difference. Jeremiah was founded 25 years ago. Our visionary founder, Michael O'Connell, actually engaged with civic, education, political, religious leaders to start Jeremiah. So our organization was started on the basis and the foundation of community partners. And so we have been really leveraging that and also engaging in a very intentional way. And so our name actually comes actually from a verse in the Bible, that the community thrives when the individuals in that community are thriving, and individuals thrive when the community is thriving. And that really drives everything that we do. So one of the questions was, have we seen things change since George Floyd was killed? And I would say we have been rooted in that community partnership, and it is why our families have experienced such success in large ways. But we've had an amazing opportunity as corporate partners, for-profit organizations have wanted to engage in ways, I think many times feeling helpless. What do we do? How can we help? And our organization is one that serves a population that is at really the intersection of so many things: poverty, BIPOC population, workforce development, education. And so our community, it's a foundation, but it also has increased greatly. And we're also serving double the number of families that we have in the past 2 years. And a huge piece of that is engagement through corporate and for-profit partners.
Patty, your answer just teed up our next question so well. As the title of our panel suggests, we're really here to talk about the increased focus that corporations and in their outreach have made on underserved communities, the last few years. Here, as you just mentioned, we tend to focus on the George Floyd moment as kind of a turning point. And but I sometimes wonder, we talk about that a lot at the Star Tribune, of course, but I sometimes wonder if that's a little parochial, and if some of this thinking was evolving anyway, but before 2020. So what do you all think of that? Let's start with Art on this, and zero in a little bit more on the focus that companies have really turned to in the last few years.
Yeah, I think work did start prior to Mr. Floyd's murder. I think through the social aspect of ESG. I think historically we looked at the social aspect of ESG really focusing on human rights issues, supply chain, to name a couple. I think that the shift and broadening of the way we look at ESG and the social and ESG is around how we look at DEI in that space, how we are doing right by our communities. And I think that work was happening prior to George Floyd. I do think what happened after was that the work, we went with a more intense focus on the work and a purpose. But I think what it also did is it caused us to pause and corporations to ask the question, are we doing enough? Are we doing it right? And are we doing it continuously? And so there's a lot happening in this space, and I think as organizations and stewards of our organizations and people or HR people or any place that you're in your organization, we continuously have to ask ourselves those questions. Are we doing enough? Are we doing it right? And are we doing it continuously?
Sri, go ahead.
I mean, just fully agree with everything that Art has said. But I would also encourage companies, corporations to partner with institutions, as she mentioned, which is basically that corporations are not expert at doing certain things. They're not necessarily the experts at reaching out for doing the right kind of human services. But partnerships can be hugely helpful. And I'll just give an example from our own school, which, it's education. For even well before George Floyd was murdered, we had programs. For instance, we had something called the Business Innovation Academy, which would bring in 3rd to 6th graders into the Carlson School and to the University of Minnesota to just experience the university, to get used to it, get comfortable here, feel a sense of inclusion and belonging. And they'd be taught by our own undergraduates as peer mentors to say, listen, stick with the hard subjects. If you want to come here, you can, but you have to kind of stick with math, stick with some of the hard subjects, and we'll help you. So that was the kind of the messaging that we were trying to get across. And we had a similar program called Emerging Leaders of Color, which was for high school students. But what has happened, I think, since the George Floyd murder was that we realized that we had every unit at the Carlson School was engaging with trying to sort of support DEI in different ways. And we needed an umbrella to somehow bring it together, to get a sense of what's the whole, what's repetitive, what's really working, what's not maybe working so well, just to get an understanding of those things. And we hired our first senior diversity officer. Her name is Angela Spranger. I would love for her to connect with all of you. And we've launched a new Center for Inclusive Excellence. And I'm very, very proud that a major corporation in our community, I still can't release the name, has partnered with us to get this center off the ground. And the purpose is to really, again, be a convener of conversations, in the community about what's working well in their different organizations, what else we could be doing, how can we be creative and innovative together. So these partnerships are going to be extraordinarily important, and I hope all of you can, consider that.
Well, partnerships are one strategy. I want to ask if we could get to a little bit more specific strategies for employee participation. Are there things that you need to do differently to encourage participation when you are, developing a focus on marginalized communities or underserved communities or organizations? Are the incentives different that you hold out to employees? Is the communication different? Scott, do you want to start? Or?
It's a great question. Companies have to focus, right? There's so many good causes out there, so many people in need, but you can't do everything for everybody. And so at Schwan's, being a food company, we clearly focus on hunger. And Second Harvest, to Sri's point, they're the experts in getting food to people that need food. So we support Second Harvest financially, with product, as well as with minutes. We also support youth, though. And we think by investing in youth, you're going to end up with stronger workforces, less issues, more opportunities for underserved communities. So we focus a lot on youth as well. And one example would be a group called Boulder Options. It's a nonprofit. It mentors 10 to 14-year-olds in urban underserved areas, and it happens to be run by a former Minnesota Gopher football star, Daryl Thompson, and we've been involved for quite a bit. But one of the things we do from an incentive standpoint is that anybody at Schwan's, regardless of your level, that serves on a nonprofit board, normally when you're in a nonprofit board, they want you to make a personal financial contribution. That's just part of what you do. What we do is we match that up to $2,000 from our foundation. So if somebody is going to be on a board like Boulder Options and they write a $2,000 check, we'll write a $2,000 check as well to match that. So I'm not sure it's an incentive, but it's basically a way to reward the financial contributions that somebody makes. And we've had quite a few employees across all levels participate in programs. And it also fits our human leadership development strategy, because we encourage more junior employees to get involved in the community and serve on boards, and they develop leadership skills. Maybe they're the treasurer on the nonprofit, or they play a chairperson role. So they get leadership development, which helps the company, but also helps them from a skill standpoint. So those are some of the financial and non-financial ways we reinforce and encourage participation.
Sophia, is there some things that U.S. Bank does that has had to do differently in a way?
Yeah, I mean, I think Scott brings up a great point. Financial incentives always help, right? We have the matching gift program very similar to Schwan's. We also have a Dollars for Doing program. And it's our way of saying to employees, we support your community engagement. And maybe the difference to your question there, Evan, is that with our matching gift and our Dollars for Doing program, we don't require it to be within our focus area. Similar to Schwan's, we grant and we focus our philanthropy on organizations within our wheelhouse, which is economic development. But with our employees, while we encourage them to serve on boards and volunteer in that space, we also want them to show up in the community in a way that fits them. And that's how we see that partnership is, if you have a really strong interest and maybe even a background in education, then we want to encourage employees to support organizations in that space and to partner in a way that makes sense for them personally and professionally. So that's for us is how we see partnership is kind of letting employees lead a little bit in that sense.
Art, tell us about at Wiley.
Yeah, I think that great points made. I think it's important to have both the options, and that's what we have at Wiley. We have both options of employees giving in the way that they feel is important to them, and we match those gifts as well. But it's also around finding focus as an organization in putting forth strategies around how we show up in the giving space, how we show up in the partnering space, and really honing in on what we do well. From a products and solution perspective. And it's almost like when you do that the colleagues are already doing that type of work, so they're already connected to that type of work some way, form, or fashion. You're just funneling them to specific, maybe campaigns that you've identified for your colleagues to participate more in a greater level. But what we do really focus on is creating opportunities to engage with our community and support our communities through what we do very well. And so through that, we created strategic pillars that are DEI, but connected to the social piece of ESG. And they're to promote inclusion and equity in post-secondary education, to connect underserved communities to learning and workforce pathways, and then it's also to enhance diversity in research and publishing. So 3 things that we do very well in, connected to the way we're giving and asking our colleagues to volunteer, or providing them opportunities to volunteer in.
Patty, I want to ask you, when you hear these 3 talk about the processes that they've gone through to identify organizations, I wonder what you are noticing as you try to get the attention of corporate partners. And have you noticed a change in the way that Jeremiah program has had to approach people, or do you find people reaching out a little bit more nowadays because the broad focus of corporate philanthropy has, in a sense, honed in on underserved communities?
I have seen really exactly what you guys are talking about, a more integrated, holistic approach that organizations are taking to community and philanthropic engagement. And I also just want to mention that some recent research shows that there are about $10 billion of matching funds that go unclaimed every year. So that is one thing I would encourage you all, is to really encourage your employees to really leverage those matching funds, because I think, to everybody's point, not only does it incentivize employees, it helps them feel adding even more value, but it also really benefits the organization. So I would say it's a little bit of both. Evan, what you're talking about, it's a little bit of both of us reaching out more, but also organizations saying to us, we don't want to just write a check. We don't want to just sponsor an event. We want an opportunity for our employees to engage in a way that's adding value to the clients you serve, and that's also going to impact the outcomes. So we really have looked at a more integrated approach to philanthropy and to engagement with the organizations. And so, whereas in the past, we may have gone to an organization and said, would you sponsor our event? Now we really think about that. What other ways could we be engaging with this organization that matches their mission and their core values? Because I think to one of the points, there are so many, Scott, I think you said so many amazing organizations in the Twin Cities. How does a company decide where are they going to focus their efforts? And I think to Sofia's point, how do you leverage both that, but also the employees' interests as well? And so when we're thinking about engaging with corporate or for-profit partners, we think about definitely philanthropy. 65% of our revenue is generated through fundraising, but also how can we engage with the employees that provides access to what we are doing that also supports their organizations, maybe, but their own personal interests as well. And so we have just taken a much more integrated approach. And we have had, before the pandemic, we had about 1,000 volunteers on an annual basis doing about 12,000 hours of community service. So in the pandemic, we're just getting back into that right now. But I always say volunteers and engagement is not a nice to have, it's a have to have. We could not meet our goals and serve our families the way that we do without that.
Art, you want to add something? Oh.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Patty, you brought up a great point. It got me thinking. I think sometimes we think very complex about these issues, and one thing that we're thinking about at Wiley is not everybody has the resources to donate dollars, right? So when we start to think about how can we give back to the communities and how can we make an impact, it's time, treasure, and talent, right? And so finding ways to be innovative on helping your colleagues or your employees, feel that sense of giving is equally important. And one way that can happen is by finding opportunities to partner with community nonprofits and giving that treasure that you have, the what you do well, allowing a graphic designer to go in on company hours to go help this nonprofit do something that they're in need of, or a marketing person to go in and help create a marketing strategy for this nonprofit organization. I think that's another way that we can get employees and colleagues engaged that don't have the cash to donate to get that matched amount for their desired nonprofit or organization.
While I agree in principle with what has been said, I'll maybe be a little bit more provocative.
Okay, good.
So, I fully agree that engagement is key, especially with this generation that really wants purpose in their companies, and they're drawn to mission. And, if we can get them engaged with nonprofits, with other firms, and actually seeing the impact of what they do, that is huge. But at the same time, it is worrying. I'll give you one statistic, which is rather scary, which is, Scott mentioned that United Way is no longer, for instance, the way that a lot of corporations get their employees to engage with receiving organizations. Just since 2014, just at the Carlson School, we've seen a 74% drop in individual donations under $100. At the same time, we're raising tons of money, but it is fewer people giving larger amounts of money, and that we seem to be losing that base. But unless people get engaged in giving small amounts, whatever people can afford, $10, $25, when they get into that habit of giving and they're able to also engage and see the impact of what they're doing, that's how you sort of grow them into sort of internalizing the desire to give. And so it worries me that the actual number of people giving less than $100 to the school, has dropped by 74% since 2014. And that's a little bit like, the bowling alone and the stuff that people are talking about, that people are less engaged in community activities than they were, and the pandemic has made that worse. Yeah. So how do we kind of get out of that and come back to a sense of doing things as a community? And that includes, it's giving your time and talent, and that's wonderful. We need that. But a lot of nonprofits also need the cash, and we need to start building up that kind of that giving mindset, even if it's $10, to sort of get them into that practice of giving,
I want to just ask any of you working at companies if you've noticed any of that in your employees, and maybe it's a little bit of the kind of disconnection that has resulted from, remote work and stuff. Sofia?
At US Bank, we lead an employee giving campaign, and we encourage employees to donate to organizations of their choice through our platform, and then we provide incentives for employees to do that. And to Dean Zaheer's point, we've seen over the last few years our donor rate decrease, but the dollars we've raised increase. So fewer donors are giving more. And we see that especially with younger generations who are more interested in maybe volunteering or supporting causes in non-conventional ways instead of kind of that typical donation through your workplace giving. So we're doing a lot of work internally to say, it doesn't have to be a $500 donation to be valuable. It can be $10, it can be $25, and we're creating activations for our employees. We call them special events or kind of in-house fundraisers where we have a bake sale or office Olympics to encourage employees to give at those smaller amounts and make it fun for them to do so, to get that idea of philanthropy within our employees, especially at the younger generations.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and so we've seen that as well, and I think it has to do with the environment that we're in right now. Inflation, the cost of living's going up, so those things I think our colleagues, especially at the more entry levels, are thinking about. So providing them opportunities, in which we do at Wiley, is to volunteer as a group, building community with each other, but going out and volunteering with each other to do a cleanup of a park, or to go down to the food place right around the corner to pack food. So finding ways for them to get engaged from a time perspective rather than a giving dollar amount, but we still see donations at the higher levels of the organization being the same.
I love the challenge though, because when you serve on these panels, we all have the answers, right? This is one that we don't, because it's a phenomenon that I think is interesting. As important as it is to give time, nonprofits still need money. They need to fund their infrastructure, they need to fund their staff, they need to fund their programming. And if the answer is, I'm not sure I want to give money, I want to give time, and that time isn't really what that organization needs, they're not going to have their needs met. So I think it's a challenge, and it's one we've got to be willing, I think, to lean in. Because I'll just, again, in the spirit of being provocative, you can't have it both ways. You can't say, what are we doing as a company? And say, well, here's a way for you to give. Well, I'm not sure. Okay, then what can we do to help employees better understand what the needs are so they do? But it is the downside of the United Way phenomenon that's faded, is that the money is less because it was an easy way to get annual contributions from the bulk of your workforce, and that's now gone, which makes it harder for these organizations to get the money that they relied on for so many years.
Yeah, Ed, real quick, yeah, sure.
I also think that nonprofits have a responsibility to help donors understand what the value is. What are they, I hate to do it, buying? Whether it's a $10 donation or whether it's a $10,000 donation, how do we reinforce the impact and the value? And especially with millennials right now, which I'm sure I am not. I just want to be really clear. I am not a millennial. I don't think I am. I'm not. But what we have found is that millennials aren't looking at organizations. They're looking at causes that are near and dear to them that they value. And then they are looking at organizations that are doing great work where they can see the impact and the outcome of those causes that they value so deeply. So we as nonprofits have a really big responsibility as we partner with corporations and for-profit partners to help you, the donor, understand what is the value, what is the impact, and how are you contributing, regardless of the size of the gift, to the outcomes.
I've noticed several of you nodding your heads at a couple of points here during this last exchange. And so I want to just ask for a show of hands. How many of you have noticed this in your organizations where employee giving, in a sense, has dropped down over the past few years? Yeah. Yeah, a fair number of you. Take a look around. Yeah. Wow, fascinating. There's a column in this, I think. Yeah. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to scrunch a couple of questions together and we'll see how it goes, because I think we want to leave you with some things that you can take back to your homes and offices. And so I would like to ask the folks here to talk about some programs that they've been involved with that have been aimed at and working with underserved communities, and have produced some results that you're pleased with. And then I also want to talk about some lessons that you've learned through this work. And so we're kind of scrunching two questions together here with about 10 minutes to go. So Sofia, do you want to kick us off?
I think both of your questions combine for us, because while we do have really great metrics and outcomes for the work that we've done, we're also learning that systems change work, which is something we feel very passionate about, isn't something that's going to provide outcomes in a year or 2 years or even 3 years. And the best example we have of that is US Bank did what I'm calling an accidental investment in the south side of Chicago in the Pullman neighborhood, where through a bank acquisition, we ended up investing in that community over a 10+ year period, which is something we'd never done before. And we realized, okay, we're not going to see data in this short term, we need to look back. And so that started in 2009, and we're now seeing the results of that. And the results of that was 1,500 quality jobs created, our investment of about $120 million, bringing in an additional $400 million of outside investment. And the data point that for me is the most important is in that neighborhood, the unemployment rate dropped 8%, while for Greater Chicago, it dropped 4% in that same time. So those are metrics that we're really proud about, but we're learning we're not going to get those metrics in the short term. And if we want to embark on systems change work, which we do, we need to wait, and we need to understand that philanthropy needs to be a bit trust-based, and we need to work with our community partners to hear what they need, join the table with them, partner, as has been a theme today, partner with them to understand what their needs are, and trust their understanding of the community, and give it time to really for the results to really show.
Art, do you want to go next? Things
sure.
You've been pleased with, and some things you've learned some lessons from.
So where we're at on our journey is it's new for us, and we're still trying to figure it out. But where we've really leaned into is focusing on what we do really well. So textbook publishing, we do that really well. We publish surgery textbooks, and so we recently donated quite a bit of surgery textbook to a university in Samoa, and where they were starting off their surgery program. So it's giving in a way of our treasure and our talent. Well, in this case, our talent of creating these books. Another way that we've seen successes is around a part of our business called the Wiley Edge, which is a train and deploy business. And train individuals, deploy them into some of our customers' financial institutions and in tech. And so we've done really well in finding underrepresented groups and placing them within our with our customers. So most of our talent placed in the IT world with our customers is 50% from underrepresented groups. So something we're very proud of. And we're continuously looking at that solution and opportunities for us to provide a greater access maybe to different populations that are currently getting, which are college graduates, right? So as Sofia said, it's a work in progress. It's always something you have to have your thumb on and be committed to. I think that's one of the things that we've learned is that this work takes commitment, and we're not going to see results right around the corner, but if we stay committed to it and build the right partnerships, and not all partnerships will work out, and not to get discouraged by that, we've focused and established some great partnerships. Some didn't pan out, but we're building better partnerships with the folks that we are truly connected to, and it's becoming more of a, rather than a vendor relationship, a partnership, a real partnership where you have equal buy-in to moving the needle in the places that you're looking to move it.
I'll give you an example of a success, and then I'm going to make a challenge to the group. The success is that you want to connect people with causes. So Boulder Options, we invited Daryl and his team into Schwan's to make a pitch. And my HR team identified 25 key promotable mid-manager level employees that we knew had a heart for the community, we knew that had leadership potential, and we invited them and gave Daryl a captive audience. And they made the pitch for mentors because Boulder Options has less than 100 mentors and they could use 300. And there's no reason this community can't identify 300 mentors for middle schoolers in the Twin Cities. So as a result of that, we had multiple employees say, I want to be a mentor. So we had some success that we brought the cause to us versus saying, look at the website, call Daryl up. So my challenge is, when you look at this room, people here are civic-minded, philanthropic-minded, want to make a difference in the community. I would imagine there's thousands of employees that you are responsible for in your organizations. Find one mentor for Boulder Options. If everyone did that, he'd have another 100 minimum. You'd have 112 or 13-year-olds that need a figure in their life that they don't have right now. So if you want to make a difference, that's what you would do.
For us, there are many examples because, as a university, as a business school, we've been doing this for a long time. But some of the things that I think most proud of is, we get our students to work on projects. And these are pro bono projects. Some of them are funded by folks like the Minneapolis Foundation. So, we get the funding from one source, but we're able to provide services to especially to nonprofit groups. So our students, for instance, recently worked with Project for Pride in Living on a couple of, wonderful projects. Just one to figure out how PPL itself could have a financially sustainable business model. How could they kind of go ahead? And one of the ways that our students identified, which they hadn't quite explored far enough, was we said, yes, there's foundation giving, which often has some clear strategic priorities. And of course, PPL can reach into that. But your Project for Pride in Living is also developing talent. So can we approach a different group that's one of the business units, which is interested in the talent that PPL is developing, and get them to fund some part of it? So our students are able to come up with these kind of creative solutions. That's a huge plus. Another set of students worked on transportation deserts in Hennepin County, places where their incomes were low and there was no public transport within a mile of where they lived. And that has persuaded the Metropolitan Transit Authority to pilot new bus routes in the Twin Cities. So things like that. I think it's what we're able to give back through the work of our students that's just wonderful. And then there are other things, like we've had a very successful Veterans Initiative and this Emerging Leaders of Color program that I mentioned to you. So far, I think it's been going on for about 6 or 7 years now. We've had about, something like 320 students of color, mainly from the Minneapolis and St. Paul high schools, come to us one Saturday every month. They're tutored by our students and our faculty. They're helped with their college applications, their financial aid forms. Of the 320, 160 applied to the University of Minnesota and got in, and 30 have come to the Carlson School. But we're very happy. Even the other 160 have gone on. In fact, they've been picked up sometimes by very kind of wonderful competitors of ours, and some Ivy League schools and so on. But it's just what we can do in terms of supporting these kinds of activities that we're most proud of.
Patty, wrap us up with a view from kind of the other side of the coin here.
Yeah, just quickly, I'm just, again, looking at this room. One of the things, so Jeremiah, our mission is to work with families as they move out of generational poverty 2 generations at a time through education. And so we are a college persistence workforce development program. And one of the things that we are really leaning into is the impact that internships could have on our families. And so our moms are on a journey of about 3 years. And so in that 3rd year, we are really hoping to incorporate internships that organizations are working with us on so that our moms would be guaranteed an internship. Social capital is something that our moms come in with at a real deficit, and that's one of the things that we work with them on. And so as I work with our corporate partners, our for-profit partners, internships are are a way that is going to be where you can see the impact and the outcome of a mom at Jeremiah on her journey, moving into an internship that ultimately leads to a job, moving out of a system of generational poverty into one of creating generational wealth.
It's a wonderful opportunity and challenge as well. Thank you all for listening, and please say thank you to our guests and our panelists.